Good afternoon, I'm Dan DeRose with 19 News Now. Coming to you from our digital studio, we're going to be taking you to a live sentencing in Akron where a mother is being sentenced for firing shots at her own son. They were having an argument. He ran off to his bedroom. His mother said, "I'm going to shoot you." He locked the door and she followed through. She shot through the door several times, according to police. She did not hit the 15-year-old. But as you see there, that is Alma Gray, 44, not the judge, the defendant. She is being sentenced today for felony assault and endangering children. Let's take you live to court in Akron.
Individual will need to be masked, and we will need to keep some physical distancing, but as you can see, we do have plexiglass, etc., for purposes of COVID protocols. All right, I did order a pre-sentence investigation in this matter. I do have that report, and I believe that both counsel have received that report. Is that correct, Ms. Jackson?
Yes, Judge.
And Mr. Siplin?
Yes, sir.
Mr. Siplin, do you have any corrections, additions to that pre-sentence investigation?
No corrections or additions at this time, Your Honor.
All right. Very good. Then I believe that we are prepared to proceed with sentencing. And I will turn to the state for that purpose.
Thank you, Judge. Judge, we did file a sentencing memo, so I'm not going to go over the whole thing. I know you've read it and reviewed it. The state is requesting 6 years of ODRC. I believe that is appropriate in this case. It's a felonious assault. There was a firearm involved. Although we dismissed the specification as part of the plea deal, this is a very serious offense. The victim was the defendant's son. He was a minor. He was a teenager. He was afraid for his life. He thought he was going to die when his mother was shooting at him.
Ms. Jackson, if you could talk into the mic.
Yes, Judge. And, she shot 3 times. This wasn't a warning shot. It was through the door. If you're trying to scare someone, I would imagine you would shoot at the ceiling, but she was shooting through a door towards her son. And, I'm thankful that we're not here for a murder trial. For the reasons stated in the sentencing memo, the state is requesting a period of incarceration. Judge Michael Gray, who is the father of the victim, is present with his attorney Leslie Johns, and I do believe at the appropriate time they would like to address the court.
Right, and I think that now at the appropriate time, I would ask that whoever's speaking stands at the podium. Sometimes I would have you approach, given the plexiglass and mic issues, if you would stay at the podium and speak.
Good afternoon, Your Honor. Leslie Johns on behalf of Mr. Gray and his son, Mateo Gray. Your Honor, I've had an opportunity, unfortunately, to be involved in this matter since the date that this happened, which was on April 29th of 2019. I received frantic messages and calls from my client, Michael Gray.
I'm going to object to Mr. Gray's attorney speaking on his behalf, because even under Marcy's law, I do not think that it carries a provision that a representative should be doing it. Anything that's said should come directly from Mr. Gray and not through a proxy.
Judge, I believe Marcy's law states that parents of child victims are also considered victims in the case, and victims are permitted to have their interests represented by an attorney, and they are allowed to address the court, they're allowed to file motions on their own behalf. And so I think Ms. Johns speaking to the court is appropriate.
The objection will be overruled. Ms. Johns, I don't know that your involvement is relevant. I mean, the fact that you received calls may not be relevant, but I think you can speak on behalf of the victims.
Thank you, Your Honor. What I was getting at is not to what I experienced, but what my clients experienced on that particular incident. I got a phone call from my clients frantically indicating what had happened on this occasion. They certainly had no idea what to do, in what direction to turn in. And since that time, over 2 years ago, I would just note for the record that my clients have been impacted day in and day out, not just by general court proceedings, but and the pendency of this matter, but by the fact that what occurred on that particular night is a traumatic event, which I think that nobody in this room would disagree. This is something that goes beyond this court proceeding. This is something that my clients will have to deal with for the rest of their lives. I personally have never been shot at, and so I can't speak to how that might feel. But certainly coming from the position in which Ms. Gray was in, at that particular time, the mother, the guardian, the legal custodian, as my client was out of state.
This attorney is talking about her personal experience, and she wasn't a victim. She's just a representative for them at this juncture.
Yeah. So the same kind of admonition that I gave before. I understand where you're coming from, but overruled. But if you can keep it focused on the victim.
Yes, so I am speaking on behalf of Mateo Gray. He's not here today to speak for himself because he does not want to be in this courtroom. Understand?
We can see that he doesn't want to be here. It's just.
So I will note that I do have victim impact statements from both Mateo and Michael Gray, but I do believe that under Marcy's law, he can have a representative speak on his behalf. So go ahead.
Thank you. The reason why he's not here today is I know from speaking with Mateo myself that he is significantly impacted by this offense. He cannot really wrap his mind around or truly understand, as the victim impact statement notes, how to address or deal with the thoughts and the feelings that he has because he was placed in harm's way by his mother, his parent, his guardian, his protector. He would like the court to know, as he indicated in his victim impact statement, that this is something that will follow him for the rest of his life. He's going on to college here soon. We're hoping, and he's hoping, that the mental health services that he has been receiving since this incident occurred, he'll continue to do so and be able to move past this. However, today, I think, as my client will speak to the court, is one step in the direction of being able to move on, though this is something for them that they will have to deal with and reflect on for the remainder of their lives. And so, Your Honor, I would at this time like to allow my client, Michael Gray, an opportunity to speak.
Mr. Gray.
Thank you, Your Honor. I wanted to thank the court, the prosecutor's office, and my attorney for being there and protecting my son in children's services as well. I want to address Alma directly. The amount of anger and hatred I have towards you for what you did knows no bounds. I will be back in this court every 5 years and make sure that protection order stays in place so my son is protected. You won't understand the amount of anger I have until the day you die. And I will haunt you for the rest of your life. What you did to him, just be thankful you're still breathing.
And Judge, Your Honor, as we indicated as my clients indicated in their victim impact statements, they have specific requests as to the appropriate amount of time. Certainly, my client is asking for the maximum period. I did go over with them the prosecutor's recommendation and what they are requesting the court to do, and Mateo Gray has no objection to that request. Your Honor, we would ask that you take into consideration the victim impact statements and the ongoing impact that this offense will have on them in the future. Thank you.
Anything further, Ms. Jackson, on behalf of the state?
No, thank you.
Mr. Sibley.
Thank you, Your Honor. Your Honor,
please the court. The reason that we're here today is that, one, Ms. Gray has accepted responsibility for her actions, and this is truly a matter of where I don't think that this was a criminal case, but a case of crying out for help on Ms. Gray's part. The court has reviewed the psychodiagnostic reports and knows the significant mental health history, but during the time period, I think, of what really pushed her over the edge was the lack of having a supportive helpmate, husband, partner, father, and what have you. As was indicated in Ms. Gray's PSI statement, she was offering by way of an explanation and not necessarily an excuse, in that, one, her family was going through financial help, her relationship with her husband, Mr. Gray, was on the rocks, and especially after he had given her an STD, her life was falling apart, and she had the mental health.
There's an objection.
It's in her
But
PSI.
It is in the PSI as a statement of Ms. Gray, so go ahead.
And so she is under that pressure, and along with the pressure of the possibility, in addition to not living the happily ever after, she found out that her husband was the still same miserable person that he was when she originally left him, but she believed in trying to have a family. He was the only man that she'd ever known, but her world was falling apart. And as such, this was her cry for help, because I know one of the things that she had asked Mr. Gray for help, it pretty much said, well, if you kill yourself, you kill yourself. It's no skin off of my thing. So she had no one, no resources, and it was a cry for help. And I do not believe that she intended in her mental state to harm her son. I think it was more of a cry for help and to get attention. And there was she had a mental health breakdown. While we know that from the evaluation she may not have met the legal standard under NGRI or for the competency evaluation, but what we do know is that she has a significant mental health history. As a matter of fact, I know that she had been hospitalized upon occasion, as well as, what came out is that, both she and her husband have had their own bouts with mental health issues. But even when you look at the statements of Mr. Gray, you could hear the hate and anger that he has towards his wife. And my impression of it wasn't because of what she's done, it's because of other underlying deep-seated issues. But what I can represent to the court is that Ms. Gray deeply regrets the actions of that day. And she's living with the fact that due to her mental health issues, that she could have not only harmed herself, but she could have harmed her son, which that action in and of itself has caused damage that she and her son, once he gets out from under his father's thumb, will have to work on their relationship. But as indicated by the nature of the plea, it's one of the things that, she accepted responsibility. And it's one of the things that in order for the people to move on, and especially their son, and whom she's more concerned about, I don't think that a prison sentence would be necessary. I mean, the concern is for Mateo, but imagine the impact that of his mother sitting in prison, knowing that a lot of the actions on that day stemmed from her mental health issues, not from a purposeful manner in which to do it. Now, and I would ask the court to follow the recommendations as indicated in the PSI and place Ms. Gray on a period of community control. She does not have a criminal record, but for this and maybe some other little minor traffic stuff, there's nothing on her record that would warrant prison. But what is warranted and what we do have within our community are the resources available to help her get the mental health treatment and counseling that she needs. This matter stemmed not from a criminal intent, but from a mental health intent. And part of the court's role is to balance those things. And I think with over the past 2 years, it's been, devastating to Ms. Gray to know that she, due to her mental state, that she could have possibly harmed her son. And that, to me, I think from my conversations with her, is the scariest thought in her mind regarding all of this, that she could have hurt her son. She, quite honestly, had an intent to harm herself, and thankfully she was not successful. But what we would respectfully ask, Your Honor, is to look beyond each of these parties' hate for each other and look at what we can do from the good we can come out here. Yes, there's a price to pay, but the price is not necessarily with Ms. Gray losing her freedom, but the price is being sanctioned by the court to commit to getting mental health treatment and following the recommendations there. She's not a threat to this community, and we would just respectfully ask the court to follow the recommendations as indicated in the pre-sentence investigation report.
Thank you, Mr. Siplin. Ms. Gray, is there anything you would like to say to the court prior to your sentencing?
We stand here at a public meeting.
Right.
I love my son more than anything in this world, and I still can't recall exactly what happened. Just the thought of it could have been murder was, I can't accept that. I saw him working on it. I love him more than anything, and I am so sorry I stayed in a toxic situation that was happening.
Well, I will say to everyone, obviously this is a very tragic situation involving a family that now has ongoing issues. I'm sure had issues before, but whether this has any chance of being repaired is to be seen in the future. These are the kinds of cases that really are some of the most difficult that are presented to the court, where you have an offender with no criminal history and then a very serious offense as their first infraction. That's a difficult situation. It's a difficult balance for the courts to undertake. And fortunately for the court, there are guidelines, there are statutes, there is the law that must be followed. I will first note that in a felony of the second degree, there is a presumption for prison. And Mr. Siplin has talked about rehabilitation and et cetera, and I would just note that that is only one of the two reasons that this society may commit someone to prison. There's rehabilitation, but there's also punishment. There's also protection of the victims and the community. Some of the things that it is incumbent upon this court to consider are: would community control or something less than a prison sentence adequately punish the defendant and protect the public from future crimes? Whether the sentence is proportional to the harm caused and the impact on the victim. whether something less than prison would demean the seriousness of the offense that was committed, and also whether a firearm was involved and whether there was a threat of serious physical harm to the victim. In fact, in this case, I think everyone would acknowledge, Ms. Gray too, that we are all very lucky that no one was hurt, that no one was killed. We could just as easily been here on murder charges, which would be exponentially more tragic than where we are today. So with all of that in mind, I have considered what Ms. Johns has said and Mr. Gray on behalf of the victims, the pre-sentence investigation, the victim impact statements, the plea negotiations, statements of counsel and the defendant. I have, for purposes of the pretrial proceedings, obviously, and then again, more recently, reviewed the several psychological evaluations that were done in this case. There is some history of mental illness, of depressive disorder, borderline personality disorder, etc. But legally, Ms. Gray was found to be sane and competent. She knew the wrongfulness of her actions as indicated by several factors, but also in the disposal of the gun and some other actions on the night of the incident. So having considered all of that, based upon the facts and circumstances of the case and consideration of the relevant sentencing factors, and applying the minimum sanction the court has determined will protect the public, promote the rehabilitation of, and punish the offender without imposing an unnecessary burden on state or local resources. On count 1 of the indictment, would note that this is an indefinite sentencing case under Reagan-Tokes, and therefore the court would impose a sentence of 4 to 6 years incarceration for the crime of felonious assault, a felony of the second degree. So the minimum prison term would be 4 years, and the maximum prison term would be 6 years. As we discussed when I took your plea, you will also be subject to a mandatory 3-year period of post-release control following your release from prison. When that period of post-release control is imposed, if you violate any conditions of that supervision, the parole board may impose a prison term as part of your sentence of up to 1/2 of your stated prison term. Would note that the sentence is right in the middle of the guidelines for prison that could be imposed in this matter, and because it is her first offense, because of some of the mental health issues, I find that that is an appropriate sentence. Ms. Gray, there is a rebuttable presumption that you will be released from prison at the expiration of your minimum term of 4 years or on your presumptive early release date, whichever is earlier. If the Department of Corrections seeks to hold you longer, they may rebut the presumption that you will be released at the expiration of 4 years. If at a hearing the department shows that your actions in prison demonstrate a lack of rehabilitation or that your behavior demonstrates that you continue to pose a threat to society, or that you were placed in extended restricting housing. Sorry, hang on.
Hello, everyone.
There's another. Here we go.
How's it going, man? Good afternoon.
You need to mute everything. I can hear your. Is it all muted? Thank you. All right. I apologize. I can still hear everything. All right. Again, I'm sorry. That your actions demonstrated a lack of rehabilitation or that your behavior demonstrates that you continue to pose a threat to society, then the Department of Corrections could seek to hold you longer. or if you were placed in extended restricted housing at any time during the year preceding the hearing, or that you were classified as security level 3 or higher at the time of the hearing. If the department overcomes the presumption, it may keep you longer than the 4-year minimum term, but no longer than the maximum term of 6 years. You are also eligible to earn a 10 to 15% reduction in your sentence if you exhibit exceptional conduct or adjustment to incarceration while in prison. I'm not going to impose a fine. Judgment will be rendered against you for court costs. You will be given the opportunity to pay those costs on a payment schedule, and if you're not able to do so on a timely basis, you could be ordered to do community service in order to satisfy the cost judgment. I do have 4 days credit for time already served in the Summit County Jail. And Ms. Gray, you understand that you do have the right to an appeal in this matter within 30 days after the filing of the court sentencing entry. Do you understand that, ma'am? Can you verbalize your response, please? And you understand that if you are unable to pay the costs of a transcript, the record, and all relevant documents that are required for the appeal, that they will be provided to you without cost. Also, if you're not able to pay for the appeal, you are entitled to have the notice of appeal filed without the payment of a filing fee. And if you are unable to afford counsel for an appeal, counsel will be appointed for you without cost. You understand that, ma'am? All right. Anything further then for the record this afternoon?
No, Judge, thank you.
Mr. Siplin?
No, Your Honor, but we would respectfully ask the court to allow Ms. Gray 2 weeks to turn herself in. She is currently treating part of her job, treating patients, and there needs to be a transition with that. Throughout the pendency of this matter for the past 2 years, Ms. Gray has made every court hearings, whether it was in person or via video. We just ask for that accommodation. And a lot of that stems from what we know was part of the recommendation from PSI, but she just needs that time so that her employer patients are not left in the lurch.
Ms. Jackson?
Judge, this case is over 2 years old. Ms. Gray has had plenty of time to be out, and I request that she be taken into custody.
I agree. I believe that she should be remanded to custody to begin her sentence at this time. Thank you.
Dan DeRose with 19 News. As we watch Alma Gray get the handcuffs put on, they had asked to let her turn herself in 2 weeks. Her attorney did. That motion was denied by the judge, saying that she needed time to take care of some patients that she was treating. I'm going to be honest, this sentencing had a little bit of everything in it. My mouth hit the floor several times, as I'm sure yours did. There was a white-hot hatred shown in this newsroom. There were accusations of STDs thrown around in this sentencing. Ultimately, for felony assault, that is a second-degree felony in the state of Ohio, Alma Gray is given 4 to 6 years in prison. She gets credit for 4 days time served, so that's 3 years, 361 days at a minimum that she will be in prison. Again, the son was not hit in this. The son was 15 years old. There was a fight that had started, an argument between himself and his mother. There were some threats that were made. The mom threatened to shoot her son. That's when he went to his room and locked the door. She fired several shots through the door, and we heard today it was 3 shots through the door. None of them hit the 15-year-old, and yet she gets 4 to 6 years. Again, just an interesting sentence for a felony assault. You heard the judge say that there are guidelines, there are statutes in the state of Ohio, and that she fell in the middle of this. The judge giving really no, just watching as she's let out of the court here, allowed to take off jewelry and valuables and to be given to clearly not the husband or ex-husband, but to someone in the court. But again, 4 to 6 years for a felony assault. The judge clearly not taking into account that she had no criminal record and that apparently she is battling mental health issues. I believe that goes without saying. Anyone that would fire 3 shots through a door that her son was behind believe that there are some stress issues in that. Again, this is why we bring these events to you live, so that you can see it in its entirety here, rather than just the clips we're able to show you during our early newscast. Again, several times during this sentencing, my eyes were as wide open as some of yours, again, this was there was a lot of hatred displayed in this courtroom for a case that did not have a murder in it, a homicide in it, but yet there was some white-hot hatred between the two. We didn't get real good audio from the mother, Alma Gray, 44 years old, when she spoke. You could hear that she did make some apologies. I am sorry that it got to this. I'm sorry that the situation got to that sort of comment. But then her attorney asking the judge to look beyond the hatred between the husband and wife, or ex-husband and ex-wife in this case. Alma Gray sentenced to 4 to 6 years. For those of you who are watching us nationally on LNL, we're going to turn you back over to them. For those of you in Northeast Ohio, we will have a complete wrap-up on this case and all of the day's news when we start at 3 o'clock on Channel 19. I'm Dan DeRose with 19 News Now. Have a good weekend.
19 News. First, fair, everywhere.